I read it, I was like,
Ready?
no, like, no.
All right, you guys ready to get started? All right. So for the first time, we're going to try recording this, and it's going to be uploaded to the training site. So if you or any of the other shifts need to access it at any time, it's going to be there. We'll see how this goes. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. We're going to go over the basics of the plan, just to make sure everybody knows how they can make contributions to the plan and how they can get their money out of the plan. We're also going to touch on something called dollar cost averaging, which we haven't discussed in the past. We're going to touch a little bit on budgeting and spending and what percentage of your income you should be spending on different types of expenses. And then we're going to spend the remainder of the time talking about a new offering that is being rolled out from your third-party administrator and the record keeper of your plan, which is called Alaris. So when you log in to look at your plan online, that's what you're logging into. You're logging into Alaris' website, and starting next week, they're rolling out a new offering called My Alaris, which is going to start allowing you to aggregate all of your financial accounts, not just your 457, into one place. So we'll take a look at what that is. It's completely available to you. It's completely free of charge. And again, starting next week, you're going to have full access to that. So we'll go through and take a look at what that looks like. So high level, just as a quick reminder, since we look at this a couple times a year, what is the 457 plan? Right, so remember, it's a place for you to save money in a tax-advantaged way. It's available to government organizations as a 457 plan, right? But it's similar to a 401k that's offered in the private sector or a 403b that you might see in the medical or the teaching industry, right? For you guys, it's called a 457. It's funded mainly by salary deferral, right? You say, I want a certain amount of my money to be withheld from my paycheck, and that money, instead of coming to you, goes directly into the 457 plan. The only other way to fund money into your 457 plan is through a rollover, meaning if you had an account at an old employer, you could roll that from that employer into the 457 plan as well. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, just let us know and we'll help walk you through that process. And then finally, once the money is in the 457 plan, you have the opportunity to invest it, right? Put it in the bond market, put it in the stock market, and get tax-deferred growth over time. Right? That's the reason that you're doing it, is to build up your retirement savings. Eligibility in the plan, as long as you are age 18 and you work here at Bartlett Fire, you are eligible to participate in the plan. Right? There's no waiting period. If you don't start in the plan right away, you're able to get in monthly. You're able to make changes at any time to your plan by going online to your website. If you have trouble accessing the website, just let us know and we'll make sure to get you the login information. And enrollment is easy, right? So if there's new people or someone who hasn't enrolled, you basically enroll in the plan, determine how much you want to contribute to the plan, determine who your beneficiary is. Again, a reminder, if you're married, your spouse has to be your beneficiary unless they sign off. There's actually a sheet where they would sign off saying that they don't need to be the beneficiary. You would log into your account and you would decide on your investments, right? So relatively easy to get started. But again, if anyone needs assistance, you can contact me or contact Janice, but she'll probably just end up sending you over to me anyways. When it comes to contributions, each year the contribution rate is released by the IRS. Right? So for 2020, the contribution rate is actually the same as it was for 2019. They didn't make any changes to it. So if you were under the age of 50, the maximum amount that you can put into your 457 plan in 2020 is $19,000. If you turn age 50 this year at any time, or you're already over the age of 50, you can also do a special catch-up contribution of $6,000. Right? So if you're under the age of 50, you can do $19,000 or less, and if you are 50 or older, you can do $25,000 or less. Now, something special to the 457 plan that doesn't exist for other employer retirement plans is this 3-year special catch-up contribution. Right? This is something that's special for firefighters and police officers. So in the 3 years right before you're going to retire, if you have not made the maximum contribution to your 457 plan every year in the past, right? So for example, in 2020, if you only put in $10,000, you would have left $9,000 on the table, right? So if in the past you've left money on the table in different years, then in the 3 years before you retire, you can do the special catch-up contribution where you can put in up to double the annual amount using unused contributions from previous years. So if you get to the point where you want to take advantage of that, you would contact us and we would actually direct you over to Alaris. And Alaris would then do the calculation for you to let you know how much you had in unused contributions. And then if you were so inclined, you could put in that extra money in those last 3 years before retirement. You tell us what your last 3 years before retirement are, right? Because it's different for each one of you. So you would just notify us and we would help you work on that. Now you can't do the age 50 catch-up contribution and the 3-year catch-up contribution in the same year. You have to pick and choose. But obviously the special 3-year catch-up allows you to do a lot more than the age 50. So if you wanted to put in more than $25,000, that would be the option, would be the special 3-year catch-up. There is no minimum contribution if you are a full-time pension-covered employee here. If you are a paid-on-call or part-time, there is a minimum contribution of 7.5%. Right? So paid-on-call has to do 7.5%. If you're full-time, you don't have to participate at all if you don't want to. So there is no minimum contribution there. You do have a choice on how your contributions go into the plan. Right? We have 2 options that we've talked about in the past. Right? You can put them in pre-tax, meaning that the money comes out of your paycheck, you do not pay tax on it at that time, and it goes into the plan. It grows tax deferred for the entire time that it's in the plan, and then when you take the money out in retirement, you pay tax at that time. That's what's called a traditional contribution. Your other option is to do Roth contributions to the plan. With the Roth contribution, you put the same dollar amount into the plan, but you still pay tax on it, right? So there's no tax break on the contribution that you put into Roth. But then the money grows tax-free, and when you take the money out in retirement, it comes out tax-free. Right? So it's a matter of when you're going to pay the tax. Are you going to pay the tax now, or are you going to pay the tax later? If you're in a higher tax bracket now than you think you're going to be in retirement, you're going to want to do the pre-tax traditional. Right? So for people later in their career, sometimes the traditional makes sense. If you're just starting out, oftentimes you're in a lower tax bracket now than you're going to be later, and so it makes sense to pay tax now and do the Roth contributions. If you're not sure, or you think you could be at the same point, you can do half and half. Nothing to say that you have to do all traditional or all Roth. You could do half of your contributions traditional and half of your contributions Roth, and try and get a little bit of tax diversification in there. Right, so those are your choices when it comes to contributions. Now, when you do contributions into an employee retirement plan, one of the benefits that you get is that you're automatically doing what's called dollar cost averaging. Right? And so with dollar cost averaging, what happens is that you're putting money into the market systematically at intervals throughout time. Right? So if you're paid every other week, then every other week you have money coming out of your paycheck and going into the market where you're buying shares, as opposed to taking a huge lump sum of money and putting it into the market at one given time. This is a good week to talk about this. If you turned on the news last week, you probably noticed that the market had a little bit of a correction. Right? So we lost about 12% in the stock market in 6 days. Not the biggest correction we've ever had, but it was one of the fastest corrections we've ever had. Right? So had you put money into the market 8 days ago, right before we started having that correction, you would have bought at a really high rate. Versus had you put the market in, 8 days later, you would have gotten a 12% discount. Right? So when you're putting a large lump sum into the market, it's really about the timing of when you put the money in, right? Were you at the bottom of the market, the top of the market, or somewhere in between? With dollar cost averaging, what happens is that you're putting a little bit of money into the market at a bunch of different times, right? And so what it is, it's this strategy of putting the same dollar amount in the market periodically and buying a different number of shares each time, depending on what the cost of those shares are, right? So if you had put money into the market 2 weeks ago, the market was high. You would have bought less shares with the same dollars than you could buy today. Today, with the same dollar amount, you could buy more shares with those dollars, right? And by doing that, what you start to do is actually start to push down the average cost of all the different shares that you purchase in your portfolio. So this chart shows a really good example of that, right? So let's say you're deferring $100 each time, right? So we have 3 different amounts. Let's say it's January, February, and March. And let's say in January you had to pay $20 per share, right? So you only bought 5 shares. But the next month in February when you bought, the share price was only $10, right? It had dropped substantially. And so then you were able to buy 10 shares. Then in March you go to buy and the price has recovered and you're paying $25, you only get 4 shares. Right? So you're paying a different amount every single time you buy. But when you start to average all of this together, because you're able to buy more shares at a lower price, the average cost of what your shares are worth is $19. Right, so this idea of dollar cost averaging over time allows you to buy and start to push down the average cost of what you purchased in your portfolio because you're able to buy more shares at this lower cost. Right, it's a large advantage to doing an employer-style retirement plan where you're putting money in systematically instead of just putting money in at one point in time. So that's contributions. Distributions from the plan. Right, this is always an important thing to go over as well. The plan does not make it easy to take money out when you're still working, which is what's called an in-service distribution. So there are no loan provisions on the plan, so you can't take a loan out. And the only way to get money out while you're still working is through what is called a hardship distribution for unforeseen emergencies. It's a very high level of what qualifies for an unforeseen emergency if you would need to take a hardship distribution. Right, and list up here some of the things that would apply. Right, it's illness or accident for yourself, a spouse, or a dependent. It's loss of property due to a casualty, the tornadoes that just came through Tennessee, right, something like that, something really large. Funeral expenses for a participant, a spouse, or a dependent, or some other extraordinary and unforeseen emergency. Right, so it's something very high level. It's not taking money out for a down payment on a house. It's not taking money out to pay for college education or things like that. So it's very important that you have money outside of the 457 plan in what we would call an emergency fund in order to cover expenses that might come up so that you don't find out that all the money that you might need for something has been put into the 457 and it's very difficult to access those dollars. Right? So make sure you have that emergency fund in place before you start putting too much money into the 457 plan. Now once you are retired, once you've left service here, now it's easy to get money out. Again, this is another benefit of the 457 plan over other employer-type retirement plans. So for police and fire, when it comes to their 457 plan, as long as you are over the age of 40, you can start taking penalty-free distributions out of your 457 plan. With other types of plans, it's 59 and a half, right? So it's a pretty significant age difference. You can start getting money out of the 457 at a much younger age. Now with the traditional pre-tax dollars you put in, you can take all those dollars out starting after age 40. With the Roth contributions, that's a little bit different. You can always take out the contributions that you've put in, but the earnings on the Roth side of your contributions cannot come out until age 59 and a half. Right? So there is a slight difference. So I do encourage you to probably have some money in the traditional side and some money on the Roth side, and potentially not put all of it into the Roth contribution side, just because you do have access to the money a little bit earlier. Now, once you've retired, you also have the opportunity to roll the money out of the plan and put it into an individual retirement account or an IRA. So you're allowed to do that. The only thing I'll caution you, if you get to that point and are thinking about that, if you are under the age of 59 and a half, I would caution you not to do it, because now you've locked your money up until age 59 and a half if you put it in the IRA. So if you're younger than that, it makes sense to leave it in the 457 plan where it's accessible. Once you hit the age 59 and a half, then it's your choice, right? If you roll it out, you still have the same access to it if it's in an IRA, right? But you just don't want to lock it up for longer than necessary if you don't have to. And then finally, there at the bottom of the slide, another thing to keep in mind as you near retirement age, with the 457 plan, you are allowed to take out $3,000 per year direct from the 457 plan and have it sent to a health insurance provider. So you can use tax-free money out of your 457 to pay for health insurance premiums once you retire. Again, another really nice benefit that's not available to other types of retirement plans. Any questions about the plan itself? Contributions, distributions? All right. So moving on to budgeting. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk in a couple minutes about the new MyAlaris offering. So I think all of you have that in front of you. And one of the things that this site is going to offer you is a way to track your spending seamlessly. So when you are thinking about anything that comes to financial planning, the number one thing that determines how successful anyone's financial plan is going to be in the future is how much they spend. right? So getting a really good idea about how much you're spending versus how much income you have coming in is so important. Because if you don't know what you're spending, you can't begin to identify changes that you might want to make, right? So the first thing you have to do is just know and understand where your money's going, right? What this helps you do is identify goals, right? Most of us have goals. Is it, buying a new house, buying a new car, going on a big vacation, sending our kids to college, whatever it happens to be, right? We all have financial goals. And by sitting down and actually talking about these and actually starting to track how much money is going towards them really helps you identify the goals. It also helps you to stop overspending, right? And we're all guilty of overspending in some area, right? Some of us, maybe it's dining out. Some of it, maybe it's going to concerts. Maybe it's buying clothes, right? It's different for everybody. But most of us overspend in some area. And the truth is we don't even know how much we're spending. And until we see it in black and white in front of us, that's what starts us to say, okay, maybe I can cut back here and actually start looking for ways to cut it back. It also helps you build disciplined savings, right? Because once you've identified where you're overspending and you start to cut back on that, now you can direct those dollars into some sort of savings account. Emergency fund, 457, college savings, whatever it happens to be. And finally, it gives you peace of mind, right? It's stressful if you go to pay your bills every month and there's not enough money. Or if you have enough money to pay the bills, but you don't have enough money to put into the savings account to meet the goals that you set, right? It's very stressful. So it does help give us some peace of mind. Now, the old-fashioned way to build a budget was really to kind of sit down and do it on paper, right? Pen and paper. It was a big hurdle for a lot of people, right? Because it takes time, and nobody really wants to sit down and make a budget. So again, we're going to talk today about technology that allows us to do it pretty seamlessly and just have it working in the background, and it allows us to check in on it periodically. But as we start to put a budget together, the question becomes, how much should you be spending in certain areas, right? So there's a few rules of thumb. So how much you should be spending in different areas. When we talk about your income, we're talking about your after-tax income, right? Your take-home income. So you have your gross income, and then your taxes are taken out of it, and then you get your paycheck. So we're talking about the amount that's actually in your paycheck, right? Not the gross amount. So with your after-tax take-home income, 50% or less of that money that you bring home should be going to what we call fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are areas where you have to spend money, right? You have to have some sort of shelter. Most of us have to have some sort of vehicle in order to get to and from work. We have to have electric and water and gas, right? Utilities are something that we have to have, right? So these are fixed expenses. So 50% or less of your take-home pay should be going towards your fixed expenses. Now, just because they are fixed expenses and we need them, doesn't mean that you can't trim your fixed expenses, right? So if your rent is too high, you could potentially find lower rent somewhere else, right? If your mortgage is too high, check your interest rate, right? Rates are coming down. You might be able to refinance actually and get a lower rate, or you could choose to move. If your car payment's too high, maybe you bought too much car, but you could sell the car and buy something more affordable. Other things to think about with your fixed expenses, you probably don't need the highest package in cable TV, right? So maybe normal TV is a fixed expense, but you would move cable to a variable expense. Same thing, we can usually maybe find ways to cut our electric or our water or our gas, right? So you can look at these fixed expenses and find cuts, but you're gonna have to spend something on them. There are areas that we have to spend money. So that's how you think of a fixed expense, so 50% or less. 30% of your take-home pay should be spent on variable expenses, right? So here we're looking at entertainment, clothing above and beyond the basic clothing that you would need, groceries above and beyond the basic groceries that you would need. So those types of things, cable TV, all those extras that we have in our life that give us enjoyment and that you should be spending money on, but again, try to limit it to about 30% of your take-home pay. And then finally, the other 20% should be going towards savings and debt repayment. Right? Now, debt repayment's not necessarily mortgage or car payment, right? Those are more in fixed expenses. That's paying off something that you need to pay. With debt repayment, we're talking about high interest rate credit cards, student loans, things like that. Additional debt that you have above and beyond your mortgage and potentially a car payment. right? So 20% of your money should be going towards debt repayment and savings. If you have high credit card debt, that's the first place you should be paying down. That's going to be the biggest impact on your overall finances. After that, you can start directing more of that money towards your emergency fund and then towards college savings or retirement savings, depending on your own circumstances. Any questions about budgeting? Okay, so now I want to move on to the new offering that you're going to have from Alerus. So starting March 10th, which is next week, you're going to be able to log on to the same website. It's the exact same login where you're going right now to make changes to your plan. But you're going to have a lot more available to you starting next week when you log in. I'll send an email out to Janice next week that she can push out to everybody as a reminder when it actually becomes available so that you can log in and take a look. So. Okay, so just high level, some of the slides that Alerus gave to introduce why they're doing what they're doing. So they're the retirement plan provider, right? They are the ones that hold your money in safekeeping. They're the ones who track all of the contributions that you put in. They're the ones who host the website for your plan. But big conversations have been occurring probably about the last decade about the fact that most Americans just really are not ready for retirement. Right? We're not saving enough money, we're not preparing for it the way we should be. So a few of the statistics that they brought out here. About 85% of Americans at some time are anxious about their financial lives. Right? 65% of Americans are losing sleep over something financial. Right? Maybe it's not retirement, maybe it's something else. But it's something that is causing stress in our country. 1 in 3 Americans have zero saved for retirement. Right? That's a kind of a scary statistic when you think about it. And then 2 in 5 Americans have credit card debt that they're carrying, which again, they're high balance. If you have 17 to 25% interest rate on balances that you're paying on a credit card, it really starts to cause stress and it definitely starts to do damage to your financial life. And one of the biggest ones is that Americans are not prepared to handle these emergency expenses. Right? That's why every single time I bring up the idea that you really need to have that emergency fund on the side, because we see that 50% of Americans wouldn't even easily be able to come up with $500 if they had an unexpected expense occur, right? And if that happens, what do? Again, you go back to that credit card. And that vicious cycle of having high interest rates starts all over again. Right, so what Alerus is trying to do here is they are attempting to help you bring your full financial life together and give you one tool that's going to allow you to track your financial life in one spot.
Whether it's managing your debt or retiring on time, we all worry about money. Now you can take control and build your path to financial confidence. Your retirement plan gives you access to My Alerus, a digital tool where you can track and improve your financial health. My Alerus gives you a holistic view of your current financial life. Get started on your financial fitness by linking your accounts and find out how you score in key areas such as emergency savings, retirement planning, debt management, health savings benefits, and insurance. Get a true understanding of your financial picture today and build a plan for your future. Set goals, budget, and get on the right track to financial wellness. Log in to My Alerus and get started today.
So like I said, you're going to be able to access this from the exact same login that you're currently using. So they gave us a sample login, so I'm going to go ahead and log in here and just give you a little tour of all the things that you're going to be able to do. So this is the dashboard that you're gonna see when you start to log in. So point out a couple things. So first you're gonna have your accounts. So when you log in, your 457 plan is already gonna be in here, right? Because it's Alaris and Alaris is the one that handles it. But you're also gonna have the opportunity to start entering in any other accounts that you have, right? And if you're married, this isn't just for you. You should be looking at this from a household level, right? Because the idea here is that you can see everything that's going on in your financial lives in one area, right? So you're gonna enter, here we have some college accounts. If you have another 401k or 457 from a previous plan, if you have a spouse who has accounts, right? You're gonna link all of these, and it's gonna pull in that data in real time, and any day that you log in, you're gonna see an updated balance for everything that you own. Same thing with bank accounts. So you would link any bank accounts, Chase, BMO Harris, Fifth Third, whatever it is that you use are gonna get linked on here. Same thing with your loans, right? So if you have a car loan, if you have student loans, if you have a mortgage, you can link all of this stuff into the system and be able to view it in real time any day you want. Now, property that you own, likely you're not gonna be able to link your property, but you can go in and manually enter, right? So if you own a house and you have your mortgage linked, you're gonna also wanna include your property with a value of what you think it's currently worth, right? If you have an idea yourself, you can go on to Zillow.com, look it up, see what your property's worth and make sure to enter it. That way, when you're looking at your net worth, you're gonna see property that you own, less the mortgage, right? Otherwise, you're just gonna have this big debt and you're not gonna have an asset on the other side of the balance sheet. So important to go in and enter the property that you own as well. Right, you're also gonna be able to start entering goals that you have, right? So it'll walk you through this. So if you have college goals, you would enter those in. How much is it that you wanna be able to save for college? And you'll actually start to see a bar that shows you how well you're tracking towards that goal. Same thing for any other goal you have, right? Whether it be a big vacation, whether it be buying a second home, whether it be a down payment on a first home, whatever those goals are for you, you can enter them here, and then you can actually link to certain accounts and say, this account is meant to pay for this goal, right? And it's gonna start tracking that goal for you and letting you know how close you are at any given time to reaching it. Now, I'm gonna come here under the Accounts tab real quick. So the Accounts tab is where you would go to actually start linking your accounts, right? So once you're in here, you would add an account here, and you can go to link an account, and then you can search for any account that you want. So for example, if you had a BMO Harris account, you would type it in, you would click on it, and then what it's asking you to do here is enter your login credentials for BMO Harris, right? You're gonna enter your login credentials for whatever the account is that you're trying to link. Now this website is a view-only website, right? So it's pulling in information from your other financial providers, but it's not transactional, right? So someone can't log into Alaris, see that your BMO Harris account is linked, and then go make transactions on your BMO Harris account. It doesn't work like that, right? It's just pulling over view-only information daily and updating it for you. But somebody cannot log in here and start making transactions. Nor is your login and ID being shared with anybody else, right? So Alaris isn't seeing your login and password. I'm not seeing your login and password, right? You're doing it, you're linking it, and then that information is no longer being stored, right? So it is secure. Obviously, doing anything online always comes with some slight risks, but very secure site. Again, you're not sharing those login information. You're just using it to link, and then that information is going away. So I'd highly encourage you to come in once you have access and get all of your accounts linked so that you can see what your net worth is on any given day. See how much your investments are worth on any given day. So you get all those linked up, and then you can see over here in this area, it tells you your total assets minus your total liabilities. It's going to tell you what your net worth is. It's also going to tell you what you have in each of your different buckets, right? How much do you have in investments? How much do you have in your cash bucket? What do you have in other assets? Most likely real estate is what's going to be included in that bucket. So this is a great place to aggregate all of your financial accounts. Now under the tracking section, this is where you can start building yourself budgets. When you link your credit card and your bank account to this website, it's going to start tracking all of your transactions, right? Everything that you spend is going to flow into this website, and it's going to be automatically classified, right? If you go to, say, Jewel, it's going to know it's grocery. If you go to Shell, it's